So Silverback worked with WWF, RSPB, National Trust, to make a sort of cut down, especially for our community from those films. And you'll see a lot of them over the day because we're playing them throughout Reset Connect. You can also, if you're a real fan of them, go to YouTube and watch them, or get a business card from the Saving Wild Isles stand A440, or you can see them online, saveourwildisles.org.uk/business. So on that note, we are taking our lead from that project and from the bigger project, which is protecting our biggest asset, nature. And I'm going to introduce you to our brilliant panelists. So I'm joined by Kim. Welcome, Kim Dunn, who is Business Advocacy Lead for Save Our Wild Isles. Well done on the films. I think they're fantastic. Have lots of people watched them?
Yeah, we've had a really good response so far. We've had about 300 businesses screen them to their employees. And then we've had, I think it's reached about 45,000 staff members. So we're quite happy with that as a result.
Those are good numbers, and there you go. I'm sure you can arrange a screening in your business if you would like to. And then joining Kim, we have Zach. Good morning, Zach. Zach Lewis is National Low Carbon Advisor for the National Trust. You're very welcome. Thank you. Should we just dive straight in? So, Kim, let's come to you first. So we've heard from the film, and we know that nature positive and net zero go hand in hand, essentially. But what does this actually mean? And why are nature-based solutions so fundamental to the way we approach the climate and nature crisis?
I mean, really, we're looking for the win-wins here. So this is where we can deal with climate and nature and improve them both at the same time. And nature, as we've seen in the films, is such an important ally in this space. If you take peatlands, for example, they sequester about 3 million tons of carbon in their depleted state. So if we restore them, we're really looking at drawing down carbon. And also we get massive wins for nature because they're such biodiversity-specific habitats. So by restoring peatlands, we're actually capturing carbon and improving nature. And it's the same for wetlands and flood risks, and looking at how we can deal with the two of them together. And obviously from a business perspective, if you can deal with them both at the same time, there's got to be a win, right? Because you're not having separate strategies. So the better that businesses can embed nature in their net zero strategies and work them together, the closer we're going to get to solving the nature and climate crisis.
And one of the things that often comes up is job creation. So when we talk about transition generally and, green jobs and all these jobs, are there jobs in protecting nature? In the future, we're going to see lots of people doing that as their job, because often it's volunteering at the moment.
Yeah, so we rely quite heavily, both the National Trust and RSPB, on volunteers on our sites and reserves. But actually what we're seeing from businesses, from the momentum around nature and climate, that we're now seeing jobs created in this space that didn't exist beforehand. I mean, even my job as a business and biodiversity expert didn't exist a few years ago. So there's lots and lots and lots driving in this space. We're seeing heads of nature come up in businesses and corporate policies developing around it. So really, I think this is just going to grow, and the more people we can get involved, whatever their background, there's always a transferable skill to bring into it.
Your job's quite new. What did you do before?
I'm actually a geologist, so I used to work in the oil and gas industry, and I have now transferred to here. So just putting my sins out there for everyone to hear.
Sorry, I shouldn't have put you on the spot, but I love it. I love it when we get a real moment of change. That's it. You're the living embodiment of that, Kim. Okay, I'll stop being naughty now. I'll stop throwing in questions about your personal life. Zach, let's come to you. So progress in climate change mitigation has been quite encouraging in the last few years. Well, some people would say, and we've had things like developments in net zero standardization, but we know that there are still these pinch points. So direct investment into nature remains relatively low. Do you see this as changing anytime soon? And how do we sort of need to go about it to overcome barriers?
Yeah, I think it's important that you mentioned the sort of net zero legislation and sort of improvements in standardization of net zero, because I think that's really led the charge for a lot of the things that we're trying to do in nature today. Now, I think carbon is definitely not the only game in town, but it has really spearheaded some of the developments that we've seen in the UK when it comes to articulating metrics and things like that in the carbon sphere, but that's very applicable to the nature side as well. So we've seen some really great developments in things like the Woodland Carbon Code here in the UK, which we use in the National Trust quite extensively to understand the benefits that our new 20 million trees ambition by 2030 might have to new habitats. And I think we've learned a lot about issues to do with permanence and double counting and how you account for things in nature. And that's all very transferable to nature-based sort of voluntary markets and things like that. So I think taking those lessons that we've learned from developing carbon markets and bringing those into sort of nature restoration is really critical for us. And it can allow us to sort of skip some of the growing pains that we've seen with carbon markets, which has taken us, probably decades to sort of get to the point where we are now. And I think that is actually allowing us to move a lot faster when it comes to sort of working and restoring nature. But when it comes to the how, like how can we do this kind of stuff? I don't have like a silver bullet answer for anybody here. We're still certainly working on our own solutions in the trust. But there's a few things that I've been really encouraged about. I've really been encouraged by some of the discussions recently in the last few months about the notion of contribution claims. It's a bit of a technical jargon for those of you who don't know about them, as opposed to sort of quid pro quo crediting schemes and compensation claims. If you don't know about this, I think the Science Based Targets Initiative has put together a really good report called the Beyond Value Chain Mitigation Report. Have a read of that. I think it's really encouraging. But I think it articulates how we can work together as a group of ENGOs and businesses to funnel money and sort of fill that finance gap to restore nature in the UK and worldwide, really.
Just for those of us who are too lazy to go and read the report, asking for a friend, could you just quickly give us a very quick explainer of what a contribution clean is? Because I thought it was a litter pick.
Oh, no, it's a really, so of course we've been talking for the last 10 years, 20 years about how we can sort of exchange cash from the private sector for crediting in carbon or biodiversity net gain or flood risk attenuation or whatever. And what the Science Based Targets Initiative has realized is that has created a bit of a stiffness in the sort of ecosystem services marketplace, where people are afraid of greenwashing, people are afraid of doing the wrong thing, we're afraid of having the right verified claims, and we're also afraid of things like predatory delay, stopping businesses from reducing their impacts by purchasing, offsets in some sort of way. This contribution claims concept is actually more about how can businesses recognize the desperate need, to sort of from a hierarchy perspective, reduce their impacts on the environment from a nature and carbon perspective, while also ensuring that they're contributing the right amount to fill that finance gap when it comes to climate and nature crisis.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very interesting stuff. Okay, so Kim, there seems to be a lot of momentum building for climate and nature from businesses, and both RSPB and the National Trust, you're both doing so much in this space. And collaboration is key. It's also obviously one of the themes of Reset Connect, right? How can businesses, governments and NGOs work together in this space more?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And I think what we're seeing, as Zach was just saying, there's a lot of interest, and particularly around the carbon space as well. So there's a lot of interest coming to us in terms of restoring nature for that sort of kind of project in the carbon space. What we are seeing is some amazing projects as well with companies that work in partnerships with the 3 organizations as part of the Save Our Wild Hours films. We work with a whole range of different industries and start to look at how we can, for example, restore old quarries for nature and bring wetlands back into the areas that have been drained. We're looking at how businesses can improve their supply chains and actually ask the right questions. So we have a stand that you can go and have a look at, but we've recently released a tool called Nature's Workforce, which talks about how every employee can start to look at the decision-making processes within their role in your influence to bring nature into the decision-making process. But I think what we really need to recognize in this space is that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every business has a slightly different supply chain, slightly different approach. So, working with the experts, our charities, along with all the other ENGOs and experts out there, lots of them in that room today, we can build those bespoke and make sure that we're actually getting the right models in the right place. And, we often hear right tree, right place, but actually it's broader than that. It's the right habitat, right species, right protection in the right space for nature. So really it's just encouraging that collaboration, because we've been working in this space for hundreds of years. I think RSPB has been around for quite a while, and National Trust possibly longer. So I think, we've really worked in this space, and we're looking for those collaborations to come forward. And there is so much we can do. There is so much scope for restoration, for partnerships, for people engagement, for looking at how we work with government regulations and start to do the advocacy piece around this too. So there's huge amounts of potential for collaboration.
Very good. Zach?
Yeah, I think one of the really exciting things that I've seen across the industry, particularly when we're looking at private sector partnerships and things like that, is just how much we've gotten better at articulating change and impact for businesses. So I think the Task Force for Climate and Nature-Related Financial Disclosures reports, which I'm sure several of you will be aware of now or probably preparing them now, have really set the standard for identifying what is possible and what your businesses are currently doing and what impacts they're having, but also what you could be doing. And that's really setting a sort of action plan forward for the private sector that we've never had before. And I think that's really interesting because we can now start working with you, as a sort of private sector business to say, what can we do that's going to, impact at scale, have massive co-benefits, can be done in a climate just way, et cetera. We think that these new structures and frameworks for nature and climate are really leading the charge with those sort of partnership conversations.
Yeah, not to cherry pick any particular examples, we can if you want, but what are we sort of starting to see that's kind of new and kind of breakthrough that we haven't seen before? Or what might we look out for?
So a lot of this we're still sort of really developing, so I don't know how much we can share, but I think we're being approached now by businesses who have formulated their own sort of climate and nature-related impacts to say, we're not necessarily looking to balance the accounts. We're not coming to you to just sort of be, net zero or something like that. We're looking to just invest in, the United Kingdom, a country which is, one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, and we want to have an impact that we can talk about. It doesn't have to be a sort of exchange. You don't have to prove a currency. What we want to do is we want to just show impact. And I think those conversations that we're having have been the most fruitful that we've seen in years that I've been working in this industry.
Yeah.
I think the really nice thing about nature is you can see it when it improves, and that's like a really tangible thing that people get on board with. So what we're seeing is lots of businesses wanting to work in their local areas or get involved in their local reserves and kind of get their workforce out there. And the beautiful thing is when you see a tree planted, you can watch it grow. It's a very tangible, very emotive thing that you can get people involved with. And some of the partnerships we develop really look at how we bring landscape community level engagement with nature across. So we work with housing developers, for example, to look at how we can bring nature reserves into developments, or how we can bring wildlife friendly gardens and really start to connect people with nature in a really tangible way.
It sounds a little bit like, maybe this is just my reading of it, maybe it's not quite right, but it sounds a little bit like we're moving beyond making the business case for nature. Are we getting, and I don't want to sound like a big old hippie, but why not? Are we getting more to the point where we're understanding we are nature? Like, the enveloping concept is that if we destroy it, we destroy it ourselves, because we're actually not that separate from it. Are we able to, because you sound like you're moving beyond those very kind of bottom line conversations.
Certainly, I think we are. I mean, I guess this is a chance to plug the Save Our Wild Isles videos as well. If those of you who haven't watched them, they're really good at articulating, how all of us here are dependent on the natural environment in one way, shape, or form, well, in several ways. And I think that concept that we're so intrinsically dependent is meaning that I don't want to say transactional nature of how we've done things in the past with voluntary markets is sort of shifting, but I think it is. I think we're looking at things in a more holistic manner and saying, you know what, no, as private sector businesses, we are dependent upon the environment. Investing in it has a business case. We can obtain a social license to operate. We can retain more staff. We can, improve resilience in our own supply chains if we make sure that the sort of foundational nature aspects that we all rely on are more or less secure. So I think that's been the sort of step change in thinking that we've seen recently.
I think we've got the stats now, that kind of business case has been made. We've got reports, I think the PwC one, which I'm sure lots of people are familiar with, is the 55% of our GDP across the globe is moderately or highly dependent on nature or natural resources. What that actually means is that 100% is lowly dependent. So, everywhere, if you go back far enough, is dependent on natural resources, whether that's the clean air, the water we drink, those really fundamental systems. And I think we've now made that case. We've got some of the economic numbers to kind of back it up. If I go back to peatlands, I think to restore peatlands is about £20 billion. Okay, that's a huge number, but actually the amount that they've calculated of services in terms of carbon capture is about 100 billion. So we've got those economic stats to kind of prove the business case. I think what we're seeing is people wanting to get engaged. I don't know how many of you follow the same people as me, but what I'm seeing all over Twitter, people complaining about lack of insects because they haven't noticed them this year. And, we're now seeing these effects. And I think that's helping people connect and kind of realize those dependencies really closely.
It's called X now, by the way. No, don't worry. Okay, so let's just do a roundup because you may want to plug the toolkit again. I don't know, but I think it may be. But what's the most important thing that people here can do now? So people will be at different journeys on this as well. So some people might just be starting and some people might be quite far along. And also given it's London Climate Action Week, what can we do for nature just to finish off with, Zach?
I think, we're all here at Reset Connect, right? The clue's in the name, Connect. I think the task that we have at the minute, this sort of climate and nature finance gap is vast. And, we're talking again in the UK, one of the most nature depleted places in the world. So the task is even larger for all of us now. And we're not going to do it alone. The National Trust isn't going to do it alone. The RSPB is not going to do it alone. And none of you listening today are going to do this alone. We have to work together in partnership. And I think that's what the National Trust is very keen to do. So have those conversations, those new conversations with people you don't know, to sort of brainstorm what sort of things can we do together to sort of connect the dots that haven't been connected, for ages, and how can we work together? I think that's the most important thing that anybody can take away from this.
Okay, thank you for that very good advice. What do you think, Kim?
I think for this audience, in terms of net zero, bringing nature on board is just so fundamental. The closer we can work them together, and they're so intrinsically linked. So I just encourage anyone, whoever your role is, whatever you do in your company, to kind of go and look at what you can do for nature and how you can get into decision-making processes. There's some amazing case studies. You can come and talk to us on our stand, and we've got a whole list of resources you can go through. But really, echo the collaboration point and just recognize that everyone has a role to play in this and just get on board.
Okay, the stand number again is A440, I believe, and the toolkit to download.
Yes, it's just a website. It's a web page, so it's not downloadable, but there's lots of resources that you can go. We've got PowerPoint templates and email templates and all sorts of things that you can use. But it's Nature's Workforce. If you Google it, it will come up. We've also got links and QR codes on the stand. It's really useful. It starts to show you the background knowledge you need, but it also guides your conversation. So how to get colleagues involved, what kind of information you can be sharing to kind of drive that internal point. And it really it's aimed at anyone, whoever you are, whatever your role, just to get started in the nature conversation. So I really hope it's useful. But yes, Nature's Workforce, have a look at it and let us know if you use it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for motivating us this morning and kicking off day 2 with such flourish. Thank you very much to Kim Dunn and to Zach Lewis. Can we have a round of applause for our brilliant panelists? Thank you very much. You are free to go. Thank you so much. Thank you.